So welcome to another episode of Ag Warriors, another online episode. So that's a little bit different. I much, like I was saying, I much prefer to be in person, but I think we can pull this off. Pretty happy to welcome Jesse Allen from what? Well, tell me your organization, Jesse. Let's just start there. It's a mouthful.
Jeremy, thank you for having me, buddy. I appreciate it. So our company is Farm and Ranch Media, that's relatively new. It's like our umbrella company over top of a few different ag radio networks and programs that cover the U.S. and North America. So that covers the American Ag Network, which is like short form, your markets, weather, ag news, updates for radio station affiliates, predominantly in North, South Dakota, and Nebraska, but we have affiliates in other states as well, Iowa, a few in Illinois, Minnesota, etc. But then also, I host our 2-hour-long talk shows for our company, Agriculture of America, which many people hear on radio stations across the country, 70 some AM, FM radio affiliates, and Sirius XM 147 rural radio every weekday. And then we also have an afternoon program that's about 10 terrestrial affiliates, but then also podcast on YouTube and audio podcast, Market Talk. And that's kind of the afternoon version of AOA, but it's more markets based. It's commodity markets, livestock, etc., big picture things, risk management, conversations, financial stuff, etc., etc. So I host both those shows. I oversee our entire content team for Farm and Ranch Media.
Wow.
So we have a couple other broadcasters on our team that are fantastic. But I kind of lead our entire game plan, so to speak. I guess I'm kind of the quarterback or the offensive coordinator or whatever analogy you want to throw in there. But I've been a farm broadcaster for, what are we now, 13 years. Grew up in north central Iowa, tiny town, 100 people soaking wet, called Marble Rock. Started my career at my hometown radio stations in northern Iowa. And it's kind of snowballed from there, Jeremy. And now I'm hosting.
Now you're the quarterback or offensive coordinator for. It's so funny. I was like, so introduce your organization, and then you went on for I'm like, dang, that's you got a lot going on. So we'll just call you Jesse Allen from AOA. But I love that you dove into that, because you do have a lot going on, which is why I wanted to have you on the podcast. I mean, I feel like you're in tune with farmers and also commodity, like just the agricultural community quite a bit. So it'll be fun to get your take on some of the crazy things that are happening. But growing up in a town of 100 soaking wet, which is a funny way to describe your population. What was growing up in small town Iowa like?
Typical rural America. I mean, small town way of life. My parents ran the bar and restaurant in town for almost 30 years. So even as a little kid, I after school would go in there, or if I'm not in school for some reason, be in there, and all the farmers are sitting down having coffee, come in for lunch, that kind of thing. I mean, I lived steps away from the grain elevator in town, spent a lot of time on, family, friends, farms and ranches right around Marble Rock.
Talk about
slow way of life. I mean, that typical Midwestern upbringing, small town, everybody knows everybody. My graduating class was 50. Just that typical, FFA kids in school and that kind of thing. I mean, just that typical small town Midwest way of life is the best way I could say it. And, I gained a lot of perspective and appreciation for that. Especially I live outside of Nashville, Tennessee now, for reasons, other reasons, because I'm also a songwriter too, a country songwriter and singer. And so that's part of what facilitated the move, but still very obviously connected to agriculture. And so I wear kind of both hats. But man, that I still love that small town way of life and have a deep appreciation for it. And that's why, when I found myself in this new role with AOA, for instance, and more, to your point, like trying to stay in tune with what's happening on the farm and advocating for folks in rural America and giving them a voice and giving them a platform to talk about their story and what they're dealing with, on their farms in America, in Canada, wherever here in North America, around the world, et cetera. Like that's just, I found a love and appreciation for that. And that's what I care about. That's why I wake up every day and pour a cup of coffee and get to work and, put time and effort into this and having these conversations to make sure, again, that way of life that I grew up with is preserved for years to come. I think that's what's at the heart of why I do things.
Well, you basically took the bar where your parents ran, and you've just put it on air. I mean, because
Kinda, yeah.
If you know any, I mean, you clearly do, but I also know what small town America looks like, and I mean that bar/restaurant is every farmer's hangout, and everything that's happening not only on the farm but in the county and in the state and in the country is discussed at length. I mean, there's probably some fibs told around those tables as well, but as you were talking, I was like, man, you just basically took your upbringing and just put it on air.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And you learn a lot. I did learn a lot at a young age from those conversations, some of those tall tales, some of those fibs too. I mean, those are always there, but, and even that model has, it was the bar restaurant, the coffee shop in town, the gas station, the shop on the farm, that still happens to this day. Everyone, it's grab a beer or grab a coffee or whatever. And people are sitting around talking about things and talking about issues. And yeah, I think I've never actually thought about it that way, Jeremy, but that's a good way to put it. Is I've essentially taken what I learned from that upbringing and being in the bar restaurant and put it on air. I'm going to steal that. That's a good way to
you can have that. You're welcome. I mean, you basically, yeah. And I think that you're taking, one of the things that you're doing, and I mean, I was interviewed by you, so you asked good questions. And I think really that is the goal is, I mean, I could just picture you soaking up everything at that bar restaurant, but asking the questions and then just listening to what the farmers have to say.
Yeah. And that's really what's at the heart of it. I'm, some people will say I'm an expert or whatever. I mean, okay, fine. Maybe in some ways I've become one, but at the same time, I'm just a facilitator of the story. I just want to make sure that folks are able to tell their story the way they can. And, every side of the story too. I think that's the big thing that I try to do is let's cut through the noise. Let's cut through the BS. Let's not waste time, but let's hear what's going on in rural America and why some folks, why one organization believes this while their counterpart organization believes something different. For me, everybody should be able to have a voice. Agriculture is one. And so that's kind of
my whole
goal is to facilitate those conversations, really. And, make people think, I guess, is what I try to do every day with AOA or with anything I'm doing is just take it a step further and make people stop and think about different perspectives in the conversations I have.
That's awesome. So did you always know that you were like wanted to be behind a microphone, that you wanted to be doing this? Like, were you like a little kid just like interviewing your parents constantly, or what made you do this?
Yeah, that's funny story there. So obviously rural upbringing, everything, learned a lot as a little kid, but kind of to the songwriter piece, the music piece, I've always been a musician. I was doing that when I was a little kid. My dad was a drummer, and so I got some musical ability from him, and a little bit anyway. He was way, way better than I was as a vocalist and a drummer. But, that was my early introduction to being behind a microphone, was playing music, playing instruments, et cetera, et cetera. And was, played in the high school rock bands and stuff and all that, and went to college for music initially. Ended up the college I went to, like their whole music program, great program, but it's all opera and it's all, concert band and, that kind of thing. And I'm like,
you do kind of have an opera look, like that big. No.
I'm like far from that. I'm like country rock, like, growing up in the bar, we'd have bands on the weekends. Like I'm getting up playing AC/DC with this cover band at age 10, and singing like that. That's me. I'm not an opera guy.
What's your favorite AC/DC song?
What's that?
What's your favorite AC/DC song?
I always used to sing some Highway to Hell, but when I was growing up, which made people stop and laugh. Like, why is a 10-year-old kid on stage singing Highway to Hell by AC/DC right now? But no,
it should have been Thunderstruck, just for the record. But
yeah, well, I would agree. Thunderstruck, yeah.
Highway to Hell. I mean, you can't go wrong with those songs either. Have you seen them on tour yet?
What's that?
Have you seen him on tour yet?
I have not, actually, which is surprising. And I'm running out of time, so
they're coming to Winnipeg September 20th. I went. So Minneapolis is where they opened this tour, and I went down and caught them. And man, they're like 70, probably 75, but they rocked for 2 hours and 57 minutes. They didn't stop. Like, I was tired. I was exhausted at the end of it, and they were just like, I was like, okay, you guys are just made differently.
They're one of my remaining bucket list bands, them and Brooks and Dunn, which I think I'm going to be seeing Brooks and Dunn later this year. So, I mean, there's a cross section for you. AC/DC, Brooks and Dunn.
I mean, I love both those. Hardworking man, like, let's go. Where I was. Sorry, yeah, I totally sidetracked you.
No, I'm like that squirrel moment. Like, no, it's a good dovetail. I love it. So basically, what it was that was like my early introduction to a microphone. The radio thing did not come out until college, and didn't like that music program. So I said, I got to find something else to do. But I had always grown up as a little kid, like watching the news and this and that. And my fixation when I was like 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and turn on Connie Chung on TV. And like, just don't ask me why, but I did.
Weird kid.
Yeah, I don't know. I was watching the news as a little kid when I couldn't sleep at night. And so I said, well, maybe I'll go into journalism, like let's give that a shot. And that naturally went to radio because I'm like, I can't write. I don't want to be on TV. Like, I don't have the face for TV. I'm like, but I could be on the radio maybe. Let's try it. And, it just naturally, like, I ran my college radio station, really took that on, found a love for it, did some internships. My first internship was at my hometown radio stations back in northern Iowa. I was up there for a summer and learned a lot and this and that. And I had met the farm broadcaster who was there at the time. Fast forward to the spring of my senior year in college, he had moved to WHO radio in Des Moines. Mark Dorenkamp's his name. He's a very good friend of mine. He's with Brownfield now. But I, met Mark again there, and he said, hey, they haven't hired a farm broadcaster back in Mason City at KGLO. You should apply. And this is, where the funny part kind of comes in. And I looked at him dead in the face. I said, Mark, I don't know how to read the markets. I've never done that. Like, yeah, I grew up around agriculture and understand it, but I don't know how any of this works. He gave me a crash course in the markets, like we're talking a 5-minute crash course. Like, we printed off some stuff off DTN, and like he, ran me through some things and said, you should apply. They're expecting your call. Applied, did an interview, got hired. And I'm going, okay, I'm a farm broadcaster now. What am I doing? And, my first couple days on the air were rough. I remember my second day, it was hilarious. I thought I nailed it because I always did the back half of the noon hour. We did a whole ag, half hour there. and I was reading hog prices. And, you know, when you see the price of hogs, it's, you know, whatever. And then it's CWT for hundredweight. I read it as counterweight. I just didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, oh, that must be counterweight, because I didn't know. Got a call from a farmer like 2 minutes after I went off the air. And he's like, hey, you did a great job, blah, blah, blah. By the way, it's hundredweight. Have a nice day. And he hung up the phone, and I was just mortified. I'm like, oh, great. Here we go. You know, but
hey, somebody was listening. At least one guy was listening.
Yeah, at least somebody was listening and was, you know, nice enough to correct me and you know, whatnot. So I didn't make that mistake again. But that was, you know, my introduction to radio, as I kind of fell into it. I did not envision myself going there, but now I look back on it and I'm like, oh man, I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing. And obviously radio has evolved into podcasts and YouTube videos and everything else. Like, it's multimedia now, obviously. But you know, I started, you know, and with very little knowledge, and have just grown and progressed from there. And, you know, now here we are. And that's kind of the long and short of it. So, yeah.
What was the defining moment where you were like, okay, I can do this and I can make a career out of this?
I would say probably I was a couple years in Iowa. And so on top of being the farm broadcaster, when you're at a small, tiny station in the middle of nowhere, you're typically wearing like 17 hats. I was doing sports broadcasts. I was filling in on the morning news talk station to help out. I was doing like general news sometimes. They had the programmer and the morning host for the country radio station left. And they said, well, hey, Jesse, you're the only one that knows country music in the building because you're a singer and a player. So can you just manage this till we hire somebody? Well, that turned into 6 months later. I walked into my boss's office and said, you haven't hired anybody yet. Are you guys going to give me this job? And I'll do both, obviously with a pay raise, which wasn't much, if anything at all. I mean, but I as a 25-year-old kid, I got up the gumption, 24-year-old to walk into my boss's office and ask for that, and got it. And started doing that, started getting reaction from, listeners to the country station, but also farmer listeners that were, like, hey, this kid, he's been around a while now. He actually kind of gets it. All right. We appreciate, what you're doing, and started hearing that more from folks. And once I started hearing that appreciation from farmers, ranchers, or the general public, if I was doing the country stuff, it was like, okay, hey, I actually might not be too bad at this. So I might be able to make a career out of it. And, it was one of those things where wearing all those hats, COVID hit, world stopped. We were trying to shift workflows and do remote things and still trying to cover all these different pieces. And I had just gotten burned out. And that was when I said, well, I'm going to move to Nashville and pursue my songwriting. And, radio's been fun, but I got to take a break. Well, it was like a 3-month vacation, and I got hired by the company I'm with now. And, that's obviously changed my outlook and perspective, and moving up the ladder, so to speak, into more of a, having a national program and that kind of thing. It's made me realize that, hey, there's a need for this, but also I've been able to build a career out of it, and I'm happy that I'm able to do it. And I hope that I'm, able to do it for a long time, or as long as people will listen to me and have conversations with me, I guess, Jeremy. So,
well, that's cool. I mean, COVID changed a lot of things. Obviously it took I was getting stressed out and burned out just listening to all the things you were doing. So it gave you that opportunity to step away, and then obviously some cool things happened with AOA. You've mentioned a few times kind of throughout this conversation, and it is something that I had written down and wanted to ask you about, but you're big into songwriting. Is it something that you, I guess, do you have any big songs? First off,
well, I have music out, Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. Music video on YouTube, a couple things like that. I wouldn't say big songs. I have the lead single I had from my first EP I did in 2018, got some Midwest radio airplay, which I'm very blessed that I had that for a little while. I had a single after I moved to Nashville that did like 100 some thousand streams in a month, which was pretty awesome. That kind of thing. And so I've had some success, and I've been able to tour, and I've been able to open up for a lot of, big major label acts and play fairs and festivals and, awesome venues like Surf Ballroom back in my hometown area, Clear Lake, Iowa, where Buddy Holly last played, bucket list places. I've been able to do that and been extremely grateful to have those opportunities. My songwriting, it's been funny, when I moved to Nashville, almost immediately, after moving a couple months, like I said, I got hired for, work with our company, with Farm Ranch Media. At the same time, I was, trying to tour as well. And I met my now wife. And she's from here. And so that kind of, life hit. And I kind of put a pause on the music stuff for a bit, got married. We have an almost 2-year-old son. Things just, life kind of changed. And I put a lot of focus into being a farm broadcaster more than my songwriting. But I'm not saying I haven't discounted that either. I've been doing a lot behind the scenes. I've been writing for myself, writing for other people, producing a little bit, just not necessarily touring at the moment, which, like everything, the economics of business have changed. The economics of touring as a independent artist with no record label are pretty tough at the moment. I mean, it's pretty hard to do, 4 or 5 guys in a van going 10 hours across the country to play for $1,000. You're losing money,
Sounds fun, but you're
fun.
not taking care of the 2-year-old and the wife that way.
Yeah. 36 with a wife and kid and a 2-year-old and hopefully more babies on the way eventually, and that that doesn't necessarily pay the bills, so to speak. But for me, I had a lot of fun when I was in the Midwest before I moved, and when I first moved, the touring and everything and the music I put out, I've been blessed. I've had a lot of opportunities. I'm still performing. I still play monthly, or every, few times a month in Nashville for the writers round, kind of the songwriter showcase type thing. Have played some private events for ag companies. If Thunderstruck is doing a big convention, you can hire me to play,
Yeah, let's go.
I'm doing some of that cool stuff and utilizing that as a way to go perform still. And I'm not saying, never to the music thing, because truly it's farm broadcaster, artist, they go hand in hand. Neither is more important to me than the other. They're both as equally important as one another. And so, we'll see what this year holds. I have new music I'm working on to put out. Kind of, I've also moved into a different stage of life, obviously. So writing the drinking songs and getting my heart broke songs are kind of done. And now it's family.
Potty training songs.
Yeah. Rural America and potty trading songs. And what, it's kind of moved on. So, I've got a little bit of a, not a rebrand coming per se, but just a refresh of, re-intro of me since I've taken a little time off. And I kind of did it on purpose because I had seen that I had hit a point with my music that I needed to stop and smell the roses a little bit and take a breather and pour myself into my marriage. But also too, the world of TikTok and everything else, I'm not a TikTok star, and that's where the music model has shifted a lot. So I was like, okay, I need to take a beat, pull back from that. Let's focus into the ag world and the things I'm doing in media and radio there. And now that I've got that really at a good spot, I believe, and we're doing a lot of cool things with our company, now I'm kind of bringing the music thing back in, and I'm slowly starting to, get back into that. But also, someone asked me this here the other day, actually, that for the longest time, I tried to keep everything separate. Like radio was one thing and the music was another thing. And I didn't let the worlds, didn't let those two things collide. But there's no point in that anymore. Like I can't do that. And I don't want to do that. Like, hey, when you talk to me, you're getting the whole thing. It's the musician. It's the ag radio farm broadcaster guy. That's just who I am. And so that's, where some of that cross connections come in, like playing some different events for ag companies and more and whatnot. It's just like, hey, this is me. This is the package you get when you're working with me and when you talk to me. And so I guess
cool.
Yeah. Long and short of it is, just, both things are important to me. And, I'm excited to see what the rest of this year and beyond holds. So
basically what I heard is you took a hiatus because TikTok was really becoming a big player in putting out music, and you took a hiatus so you could learn some TikTok dances that we will be seeing on TikTok all across North America. That's basically what I heard.
I am a horrible dancer. My wife can attest to that. I can do a very poor two-step. That's about it. So I don't know if there's going to be any TikTok dances anytime soon.
It'd probably go viral. I mean, people go viral for the craziest things.
That's true. That's true. And that's the thing too, is like being a musician right now, and even like someone in the media, it's not just like creating the art or having the conversation or this or that. I think this pertains to everything. You have to be a social media content creator now. Like that's the only way to push what you're doing and be seen and heard in many cases. And that in itself, being a full-time content creator is exhausting. Like,
how do you
Yeah.
create content, write music, be a dad, handle the main gig? I talked to Zoe on the podcast last week, and we were just talking about how much time and energy, and I've had some other influencers, if you will. I mean, really just real people that also have a big social media following, and it becomes a lot when you're having to record and edit and put it out. And
we know there's tools now that can help with some of that. And, this rise of AI and this and that, like, can help with some of that content, like generation or management or whatever. And that may change the game a little bit, but to your point, it's okay. I did an interview with Jeremy, but hey, now I got to like clip this up into shorts and reels and, put the audio on the radio, but also the video on YouTube and the website and share it and try to get traffic to it. And that just gets to be a lot, especially.
You just exhausted me just talking about it. I'm glad I have a team that does that, but it's a lot.
We have a small team. And so a lot of that stuff behind the scenes, like I'm doing it. I'm responsible for it, for my own stuff, or our other broadcasters are responsible for it. And so it's like, it's just, and same analogy with like an independent music artist. A lot of them are responsible for their own content and posting and doing their own thing. And so it is a lot. But I will say this, and I do mean this wholeheartedly, might be a lot, content creation, this and that, but still not as hard of a job as the farmer and the rancher. And I think we can both agree on that. So
100%. And let's shift into some of those things, because you have conversations with a ton of farmers just from where you sit. What do you think's concerning farmers the most right now in North America? Like, you talk to a lot of people. What's the number one or top two things that are concerning farmers?
It's the cost price squeeze. I don't think there's any secret around it. And this has been, this issue hasn't just developed overnight. And, I talked to a lot of political figures as well and this and that. And you could go down that rabbit hole, but in the bare bones of it, the reality is years and years and years and years of farm policy that maybe hasn't been well thought out, and trade policy that hasn't been well thought out, and this and that. And I'm thinking all the way back to, the first Bush administration, or even back towards Reagan. Like, we're talking decades of poor policy decisions or, kicking the can down the road and this and that. And it's all capitulated upon itself to where we're at now, where you have skyrocketing input costs, whether, and different drivers for each segment, but you have the cost of inputs here and you have commodity prices here, and the gap just continues to widen. And I know for so many folks in rural America, it's a hard conversation, and you're seeing folks, the bankruptcies and more. And I'm not going to say it's the 80s farm crisis, but it's definitely, a close second, I think, is where we're heading. And it's a problem. And the question is now, how do we make meaningful change and reform, or how quickly do things balance back out? Do we see inputs come down and commodity prices come up, or what happens? There's no magic answer to that. And 2026 is going to be a tough year, because I think the other backdrop of this is that folks who had built up some liquidity and whatnot and some cash reserves, those are gone. And so now it's all in assets, it's all in land, it's all in equipment, this and that. And there's a lot of folks that are concerned. I've heard from some farmers who have said they could lose less money this year if they just do summer fallow, do a cover crop. Forget putting corn, beans, spring wheat, cotton in the ground. I'm just going to put out a cover crop of some kind. And hey, I'll still lose money, but I won't lose as much if I put all the high-priced inputs into putting a corn crop in the ground.
It's ridiculous to even think that, but it's the truth.
Well, and part of it too is that we're really good at what we do, Jeremy. We're good at growing crops in the U.S. and in North America, and we have a fair amount of supply. And that's the other thing, is we got a lot of supply on hand, and we continually refill those reserves. And that's part of what depresses commodity prices, is when we have a ton of corn, the market knows it. And it's a tough conversation, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and every farm's going to have to be different. And unfortunately, some folks are feeling the brunt of it more so than others. But I hope that we can drive effective conversation and change, and understand that this is not a problem that has been brought on in the last 6 months. This is a problem that has been building for 2 decades.
So there's 2 things that popped into my head, and one of them is, we do have a lot of reserves, and one of the things that I think, or I'd love to have your opinion on, is, there's a lot going on geopolitically right now, in all kinds of different areas, but there's a lot of, like, corn and beans are they're primary crops for the Midwest. We produce a lot of those. Brazil, where I've spent some time now, is producing a lot of corn and beans, and it used to be that we used to import a whole bunch from Brazil, and then we would ship out. We would process it and ship it out. Well, now they're just going direct to where we were shipping. Yeah. How much do you feel like this geopolitical turmoil that we have is what's driving this?
I think it's a huge part. And essentially, and I've said this analogy before, and I was even saying it a couple of years ago, we're seeing a reshuffling of the deck chairs on the ship. And to your point, Brazil, Argentina, China has invested in a ton of their infrastructure. So of course, they're getting that relationship there, and the U.S. is in a lot of ways becoming a secondary supplier to Brazil. Mm-hmm. And so that means we have to look for other countries, or, maybe some of our crops going to South America as imports, things of that. But I think we got to look at domestic uses more here as well, in the U.S. and in Canada and Mexico. Like, there's opportunity for growth there. There's a lot of policy on the table that could, help with some of that, E15 year round. I mean, just a simple, legislation piece that says you can have it, not a mandate. I mean, there's no reason that we shouldn't have that at this point. We should be talking about E30 or more E85 or whatever. And there's things like that could be done to help with, some of these challenges. But the geopolitic piece of this, absolutely. And again, it's tied to those decades of poor policy decisions and almost like, nonchalantness, absenteeism, like, just saying that, oh, we're the best, and the US and Canada and North America is going to remain the main supplier, and not paying attention to making meaningful inroads. And now we're playing catch up in a lot of ways. And at this point, the deck chairs have shifted. And so where do we go from here? I think is the big question. And that's what we're seeing play out a lot right now. And that's going to probably play out for the foreseeable future. So.
And it's scary. And I think you hit the nail on the head is, it used to be that China, India didn't necessarily have their own infrastructure, so we would process and ship over. Well, now with some of the decisions that are being made, we're basically forcing our connections to just bypass us and work together. And as they build their infrastructure, they don't need us. And, and I think the other part of this is, the input costs. It's one thing if it's crazy. There's a lot of places in North America last year that had unbelievable crops. Mm-hmm. And if they just would have been paid the way they were paid the year before, they would have actually made money.
Yeah.
One of the other question that popped into my head, Jesse, is I feel like there's a real disconnect between the general public and agriculture. And the question that popped in my head is, do you think that same disconnect, or the reasons for those disconnect, are also between our government and the farmer?
I think you can make the case for that, yes. From the general public, from the consumer side, I think a lot of folks, they're asking questions more so because things are more visible now, with social media and this and that, and et cetera. They want to know where their food comes from. But a lot of times they don't understand how that process goes. And, they just go to the grocery store and assume that, oh, my food comes from the grocery store. Well, no, it comes from a farm somewhere here in this country or somewhere else around the world or whatnot. And so that disconnect, and then they hear all this, different sides of a story or misinformation or disinformation or whatever, and believe it and run with it. And then they, believe that this is bad or that's not good or whatnot. And so I think that's a big thing for farmers, that I keep saying this. And, there's a lot of folks, ag influencers and people in media and farm broadcasters and more, like, trying to not only tell the story of ag and talk about the issues impacting the ag community, but also making sure consumers understand some of what this is and trying to make it simple so it's not too in the weeds technical talk, that they have a better understanding of where their food comes from. But I think you see agriculture and farmers in some ways kind of being made the villain a little bit to consumers right now. And so trying to get past that is a big thing. But I think for farmers too, in terms of the government, it's kind of the same thing, but in reverse, so to speak. Like, farmers are trying to talk to government officials to say, this is broken, this needs fixed, et cetera, but they're not fully listening to them. And I think part of that is maybe because you have, one group here, one group there, or this influencer, group is getting the ear of certain folks and telling them what they want to tell them. And it's like, if you could get all of these groups together to advocate for agriculture, to fix issues that are happening here, because I think a lot of farmers and ranchers and ag groups and companies and more, like, we all agree on like 80% of, things in ag, but then there's that like 20% of, divisiveness. And when Congress and the administrations and more and every, like, they're getting all these messages thrown at them on top of all the other things that they're dealing with, it's sometimes it's not as unified of a message as it seems like, or as it should be. And so I think to your point, it's, farmers are stuck here because they're trying to educate consumers, but then they're also trying to educate the government, and they're kind of stuck on an island, so to speak.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that we're in danger of losing what is the backbone of our society in North America. Like, we're 250, we turned 250 this year. And this is one of the things that, like, I'm talking to farmers that interest rates are 8% right now. And you're talking to these same farmers. We're talking from two different sides. You're talking to them from your seat. I'm talking to them as, their potential customers and stuff like that. And it's a tough thing to be a farmer out there right now. And then you get the public perception of what agriculture and farmers and, what eating healthy and all of these different things are. And now it's like, man, it'd be a lot easier to do something different. And if we lose our farmers, we're in big trouble.
And to that point, and I'll say this, and it might piss some people off, but it's the truth. I feel like is that I see all the comments about, oh, farmers are getting another bailout and this and that. And farmers, I understand, and they say it, they don't want bailouts. They want markets. They want to be able to market their crop. But we're at a situation, to your point, where and this is again back to the years and years of bad policy, and we need meaningful reform, but we're at a point now where if we don't see some of this aid, consumers and everyone else are going to start wondering where their food is, because we're going to start.
And why is it so expensive? Because if we lose our farmers,
and they're going to go, how come I can't get a steak? How come I can't get chicken? Where is ever this? Why is my chicken now $30 a package or whatever? Like, what happens? Or, what's going on? And be like, well, remember you complained about all the bailouts that farmers are getting? Well, those stopped, and guess what? We've lost a lot of farmers and ranchers in the fabric of rural America. And now we're in an even worse situation. We become dependent on other countries to get food.
Yeah,
and that becomes a national security issue. It's so many layers to it, Jeremy. But
no, I know I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit trail. But I love that's where your head's at, and that you want to help tell that story, because that is exactly what needs to. We need the light shine. Like, we are so worried about the wrong things right now, and we need that light, and the light that you have really being, broadcast all across agriculture, because we are in trouble. I mean, steaks are ridiculous right now. They're cheaper in the U.S., but up here it's like $15 for a steak, and that's if I got to cook it myself. Right? It's not, what I mean? It's something. I know that. I mean, we're 40 minutes already, which is awesome. We're just talking, but I don't want to keep you all day here. But one of the questions I wrote down, I think this. I'm interested to hear your answer to this. You interview a lot of leaders of companies, leaders of farms. We'll just call them leaders in agriculture. What are some of the traits in your seat that all of these leaders share? Like, what's some of the commonalities between them?
I see a lot of internal optimism with leaders in agriculture, and not just. I see a lot of the typical business leadership qualities. Like that. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. You need that in many ways, and I see some of that even up to the government levels, et cetera. Like, you need those basic leadership type qualities and traits, but with agriculture, we're internal optimists always. And I see a lot of that internal optimism that change can be made and things can be done the right way and things can be saved. And, we can find ways to innovate and educate and grow. And I'd say overwhelmingly, that's the biggest thing I hear is, we can, I've spent the last 6 months, year plus talking about all these issues, and it gets tiring. But at the end of the day, everyone I talk to, they always seem to be an eternal optimist. And, saying, hey, we know things are tough, but we're doing this and we're working on this. And, we're advocating for this, and we hope we can come together and make meaningful change. And there's always that degree of internal optimism. And I think that is what keeps agriculture going in North America, is that degree of, hey, we can do this, and hey, we're innovating, or, like you with your products, you're finding new ways to help farmers, with their crops and what they're doing on the farm. And, there's scientists in rooms, trying to find new, genotypes and, disease tolerances for soybeans and corn and wheat, et cetera. And there's folks on Capitol Hill advocating for new uses in ethanol and this and that. Internal optimism is such a huge trait in the leaders in agriculture, and it's something that I see time and time again.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that is, especially if you're in agriculture, that's what you definitely need. But it's interesting that you hit on that. I thought that you might go resilience, because I feel like that's probably another trait that it seems to keep popping up. Like, there's, you talk to a lot of different people, and it's tough out there. Two questions that I always finish with. And the first question is, it totally has changed from what originally I asked. So I always ask, like, because it was called AgWarriors, like, what's your weapon of choice? If you're in it deep, if you're in a battle, right, what's your weapon of choice? And when I started, it was interesting to hear, like, Quick Dick was a sickle and Rob Sharkey was a gun of some point, but it's kind of shifted because it's not necessarily that kind of battle. And so I've heard, Merdat, his charisma. I've heard so many great ones. So let me ask you, if you're in it, you're battling, whatever it is, you're in tough. What's your weapon of choice?
I'd say it makes the most sense for me at this point. My weapon of choice is this thing right here, microphone. And I guess if it's a physical battle, I could, this is kind of heavy. I could beat someone over, with it if I had to. But this is my weapon of choice. I mean, it's the way that I know how to fight these battles that we're in agriculture. So I'll say microphone.
I love it. And the second question is, you gave your age away. I was going to try to play it off like you were 30, but what would 36-year-old Jesse tell 18-year-old Jesse as far as the next 18 years and something that he needs to know? What life lesson would you give, or would you give your son in 16 years?
You don't have to have it all figured out today. There's always tomorrow, and there's always, and I know some people might say, well, you never can guarantee tomorrow, and I understand that. But again, internal optimist here. You don't have to have it all figured out at 18. My life is completely different now than what I thought it would be at 18, and that's okay, and I love it, and I embrace it, and I'm blessed and very thankful, and it's going to continue to evolve from where it is today. So I just say, it doesn't all, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to have it all figured out, but be smart, maybe be a little stupid at times so you learn, and, you'll figure it all out as you go, and make sure to, as you're figuring it out, take time to enjoy it. And that's one of the biggest things I've had to learn over the last several years too, is,
smell the roses.
Take time to enjoy it. So,
oh, that's great advice, and I mean that's fantastic. I hope that the 5 people that listen to us, and I think 2 of them might be my sons, I hope they hear that, and you don't have to have it all figured out. Great advice, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I was excited to do this just because I don't know how often you've been on that side, but I was excited to have such a talented guy behind the mic on here just to play on this side. So, man, I appreciate you coming on, taking the time.
No, absolutely, Jeremy. I appreciate it as well. Anytime you want to have me on, you want to talk shop and see what's going on, I'm more than happy to. And hopefully, if we do it again, let's make sure we do it in person. I know we were going to try a Commodity Classic, and my schedule just got way out of whack, and so I'm terribly sorry about that. But glad we could make this happen at least virtually. And anytime you want to have me on, brother, I'm happy to come back and talk.
Man, let's set something up for Boone, Iowa. I'm sure you'll be up there for that show. It's in your home state, so I think it would be fun to. We'll coordinate something for then. We could do something in person, but this is better than not doing anything at all, man. I wish you nothing but the best in the music. I know that that's important to you, and I hope you do really well there. But I want you just to keep being you behind the mic, telling the stories, because we need people like you shining a light on what is the backbone of this great country. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Jeremy, and likewise, thanks for the time and the platform, and you keep doing what you're doing as well, and the great work you guys are doing there. But no, look forward to talking to you again real soon, brother. I appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Ag Warriors podcast, brought to you by Thunderstruck Ag.